All right, Massive, this is another version of Mobile Reasoning. Today, we're going to be speaking with an amazing lady, as we always speak to amazing people, but this amazing lady is in Atlanta. Her story, why may I tell you, a whole heap of story. But we're gonna get into that. Her name is Folami Harris, and she is a dynamic freelance consultant in gender equitable and sustainable development. That was a part of her life. But right now, she gives to the earth through giving to us, through giving to the earth, and we're going to talk about that. So, welcome, Falami, to Mobile Reasoning.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being able and willing to sit down with us. Now, I have gone through a whole heap of bio about you, and I know you're on a different level and all these things, but it's so amazing to watch to see the the level of impact that you've had on the people you've been around, the people who you've actually gone out to spend your life uh, giving into. I mean, there's so much evidence of the work that you've done. Let's talk about your public health life. Um, for your entire life, you have just been giving to people, giving into people. Tell me how that started.
Well, I think that I grew up in an era where we were oriented towards social change and communal living uh, in Jamaica. This was our awareness of being a part of a bigger society that oppresses some and some that had no opportunity to get out of that bias. So when I came of age, I wanted to do something that would support liberation in some way. And for me at the time, I actually thought about agriculture, and it seemed like an odd thing in the 1960s, 70s to think about a woman going to school for agriculture. So I backburnered that and took on public health instead after studying African history and pursued a career in public health, which held me for 30 years, first with a focus on young people and their own sexual development and sexual health, which took me to Africa. And as things went with the world, HIV and AIDS took over, and that became my focus, working in over 23 countries across the globe, primarily Africa, though, where I not only was able to provide some insight and some assistance, but where I learned a tremendous amount. And that process, it cemented in me a vision of what was really required to heal not only the planet, but ourselves as a people. And a big part of that was coming back to source, coming back to our roots, whether that roots had to do with how we ate, how we treated each other, how we socialized our children and our community. But it took me back to looking very critically at those roots. So after 30 years in the so-called development field, I realized that I was spinning my wheels in mud, so to speak, that instead of promoting development on a scale that was meaningful, I was really promoting underdevelopment and going backward and leading people to think that the future looked like the first world's vision of the future, which
Hold on.
still had us.
I want to talk about that because being a development practitioner for your 30-year career and dealing with global equity and gender equality, I noticed that a theme that you had going through your career, and that was female empowerment, especially young girls. You kind of concentrated on developing young girls and giving them a voice and giving them a space, a safe space in the work that you were doing. Why did you focus on that?
I focus on that in reflection on my own childhood as a girl in Jamaica. I went to an all girls school, but I grew up in a community, a society that was pretty patriarchal and very punitive when it came to women. A set of customs and a set of thought processes that made females appear to be incompetent, weak, and certainly not deserving of control, despite the fact that women did control in Jamaica to a certain extent. This is the paradox. We still were not given the recognition and the legal recognition as well as social recognition of equals. And I wanted for girls to feel that power and to be able to use that power wisely. I remember with the development, the division of labor in the home, girls were shortchanged. I remember the sexual harassment by men and cousins, and just the atmosphere for a girl child growing up in Jamaica was one that deferred to male wishes. No matter how we buttered over it, we were really at the whim of men. If they were good, we were happy. If they were not good or not ethical, then we were further oppressed. And that whole undercurrent of exploitation of girls, sexually, physically, and otherwise, is something that kept me looking at empowering young women in Africa and wherever I found myself.
So the statement you were making before, when you're saying that we're actually moving backwards and we're not dealing with development in as you were a wheel turning in mud, that was dealing with an individual and how we then interact with the greater globe. But the programs and the focuses that you had when you were out in the field doing your development work was about giving females, giving young people, but mostly females, the access to express their opinions, express their lives, and live in or create an environment where they could be free in understanding that their input has worth. You lived in Africa for 15 years across the continent, and you made indelible impact on communities you were in. What is the difference between the life of a young person, especially a girl, in Africa, based to a life of a young person in America or Jamaica?
I want to acknowledge that a lot has changed in the last 10 years, particularly given the ability of the internet and social media to shrink our world, make our perspectives more aligned, or at the very least, make us very aware of how each of us live in our own separate spaces. But for me, when I entered Africa, girls were definitely not having a vision of being able to live their own dreams, being able to nurture their own dreams, being able to be supported in acquiring the skills to master their own destiny. It was less so in, I think, the Caribbean, where I think women had a more positive vision of what they could do. Perhaps we had a cadre of older women who were in leadership positions who inculcated in their girls the necessity of being more empowered and the possibility of being more empowered. And of course, in the United States, comparatively, that was a completely different scene. But I did find that in Africa, young women in particular and girls were very disempowered and were socially actively made to feel that it was not their time, much more than I felt that in the Caribbean, even though we were confronting physical violence and so on, and certainly much less so in the United States. So I saw that as a difference. I mean, in terms of school, if there was not sufficient funds to support all children in school, girls didn't go. When there were funds to support children in school and girls did go to school, they couldn't keep up because they had to do the household work before school and the household work after school. So there were disadvantages that were real. They were not just philosophical.
Mm. Okay.
How do you stay in school and you don't have pads if you're a girl?
Mm-hmm.
How do you stay in school if you have to walk through uh, secluded areas for miles in a context where men feel they can do anything to you or say anything to you, where the teacher, in fact, will barter a grade for sexual favors? I mean, that did not happen as blatantly in Jamaica. I don't know of it happening, but I won't rule it out completely. And it certainly was very visible in the African context. So that would be a concrete example of how our visions and our realities differed between Africa at that time and the Caribbean. I would say it still exists now, but I do see very empowered girls, even farmer girls, being much more empowered and full of themselves now than they were 10 years ago.
Yes, and I agree. There has been a definite change based on what the internet has brought and how it has exposed a lot of different issues that before were swept under the rug. But now I want to talk about your impact. We're going to get to what you're doing now, but I have been speaking to a few of some people who have been interacting, who have interacted with you, whether in South Africa or elsewhere. And I just keep on hearing a recurring theme of she's like a mother. She's like she just welcomes you and she's non-judgmental and she's open to have any conversation, but don't get me wrong, you're going to have to toe the line. But she will definitely, allow you to be you with respect, and everything goes back to the discipline side of Falami, because there has to be a certain type of I guess element that has to be there, and that they have to toe the line is this the phrase that I heard more than once. Tell me about that. Where did that come from?
Oh gosh, I suppose I am thinking to whom much is given, much is expected. Um, I think that the experience of living and working in Africa and being loved by Africa left me with a feeling of obligation to give back. I also feel that having to scratch my way in. Let me tell you, in the 90s, getting into development work was the exclusive enclave of white ex-Peace Corps volunteers.
Oh, okay.
You didn't get in there. I had, thankfully, family members who were able to support me and to help open doors for me, like Vera, who was able to write and direct me, so that when I presented, I didn't get comments like, well, we see that you're from Jamaica, but I don't think you would fit into Africa. I don't think you could fit into Kenya. It's just not the same. And then hire a white volunteer or a white graduate of the Peace Corps over me because she had greater cultural affinity than me, who grew up in Jamaica, who lived through a culture that was so similar to Africa that I wonder what the.
Mm.
So, once I had to get my foot in the door, I also had as part of my mission ensuring that whomever I worked with as a health educator, as a public health practitioner, had a respect for standards, had a commitment to the growth of our community, of their community, and had roots for appreciating the value added that we brought, the knowledge that was stolen that we could repopulate in what we did. So I didn't want any foolishness. I didn't want to go in having to do with young people in a high school that was the alma mater for the Minister of Education, where there were no benches, where the class windows were broken. No, I had to point out to them that these are not the standards that we need if we are to develop ourselves. We may not have to have a classroom like Oxford, but certainly we don't sit on the floor. We don't go into rooms that have broken windows. That in and of itself is an insult to your pride, to your esteem, and it limits how you learn and how you see the world that you would like to be better for you. So yeah, my comrades, my staff, the communities that we served, I had to point out that there are things we want for ourselves that only we will deliver or help materialize. And so maybe that's why they said, standards and so forth, because it had to be.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Now I want to talk about you now. The Falami, the new Falami. Actually, it's not a new Falami, but a Falami that has revisited her natural instinct and her love for agriculture. You have started. Let me make sure I'm pronouncing it right. Is it Ile Ife?
Well, I used to say Ile Ife too.
Oh,
It's the Yoruba creation city. It's the
hmm.
start of the Yoruba's spiritual and ancestral being. When I worked in Ghana, though, the people around me kept correcting me. They said, "No, Ilefe," and every time I slipped, Ilefe, 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 and
Ilefe.
so yes, it's
Okay.
Ilefe.
Ilefe. Now,
Yeah,
Ilefe, I remember, I think was it Honduras you went to or Ecuador?
Guyana.
Guyana. It was Guyana. Okay.
Yeah.
And you had an amazing experience in the bush where you were learning from the locals the power of nature and how to respect it, how to use it, and how to give back to it. You it's after that experience. I mean, I guess the reason for that experience was because of you wanting to create this environment in where you live. But how did that experience in South America impact
Ah, okay.
impact you know what country what country am I talking about?
You're talking about Guatemala.
Guatemala, yes, good. How did that experience impact what you're doing now?
Oh my, Guatemala was was like a catalyst. You have things bubbling that you want to do, you know where you want to go, but you need a catalyst to get you
Yes,
going.
yes,
That's what Guatemala was. Guatemala was physically beautiful. Guatemala is an example of how difficult the struggle is politically, socially, and spiritually to move ahead. We've known about Guatemala all along. And as Caribbeans, there are even some of us who ended up there too
right.
as agricultural workers and never left. But the people, I'm telling you, it's a very hilly terrain. And when I would see women going up the hill with sticks, well, not sticks, wood really, firewood on their back, I've not even seen stuff like that in Africa.
Mm.
It would be anchored by a band around their head in a little sack, and it would be so heavy that they literally would be at right angles. They'd be walking at right angle, bent over,
Wow.
in order to take the hill with all of that load on them. Yet, despite not being in control of their own land, just as Africa continues to lose control of its land, they would eke out a living from the coffee on the hillside, and they would grow whatever subsistence crops they needed for their families. Mind you now, because Guatemala is such a sexy destination, there are a lot of whites who counterculture. They want to be a part of the new age. And so they have little land plots that the government or the city councils have given to them that they would then work with Guatemalan labor for little or nothing and invite people like me and others to come in and see what permaculture was about, how we could grow naturally using the land to regenerate the soil and so forth. For these, we paid and we attended courses on how to do this, how to learn how to do this. But I don't see any of those proceeds, be it small profit or a large profit, being redistributed so that the Guatemalans who were clearing those rocks from those hilly places, so that these avant-garde permaculture institutes could invite people to come in and learn how to do this. I don't see them getting any of those benefits, even with the pandemic, even with COVID. They are there now, unemployed, not working, and not given the recognition that you as a partner would expect these development organizations to give back to the people who have worked for them for little or nothing. So Guatemala had all of this to offer me. I could see that the exploitation is still there. I could see that the power dynamics had not changed. And I could see that the struggle, despite decades, had taken its toll on the Guatemalan people. But I also learned those principles of permaculture, and through them got to see the parallels in how First Nation people dealt with the land, interacted with nature in ways that nurtured nature to give us back what we needed as long as we took care of it. So I saw all of that in Guatemala. And because I was ready to move into agriculture more seriously, it really was a pivotal moment for me and a catalyst to make that change, to jump into it fully.
So you come back to the United States and you start Ile Ife, and I mean, I've just seen some of your crops. I I have no idea how you get them to look so good and big and brawling. What is the point of Ile Ife for you? The business, not the city in Ghana, but what you have started.
A couple of things, really, a few things. With Ile Ife, I wanted to firmly sink my roots in my ancestral heritage and to draw from that what I could to move forward, like that Sankofa principle. I felt that I could go back and learn from them how to live simply and to use resources that are really free for me to use. My primary resource is rotting wood, using the microorganisms that live in that rotting wood to inoculate the soil, to revive the soil, using other techniques of capturing the water as it flowed off the land to maintain more moisture than I would in this clay Georgia soil, and to use other natural forms, other microorganisms working in harmony with them to keep the soil the best it possibly can be. The first year I grew with these techniques, I had never seen bigger pumpkins. I had never seen bigger anything. The yield was just large in size. My pumpkins were 24 pounds, 20 pounds, and I'm not kidding. The leaves were huge. My cocoyams were huge. You know, I wanted to just see one, does it work? It does work. Is it more expensive? No, it's not more expensive, but in labor, it takes a lot of labor upfront. But you can do it. If you have the stamina and the determination to do it, you can do it. We got this far with the help of a very brilliant young woman that I also met in Guatemala, who agreed to help me get started. And between us both, we tilled the land, put in the amendments that were needed, and watched the harvest that you've seen pictures of.
Wow, and those pictures are amazing. The pumpkins had. I mean, my eyes almost dropped out when I saw the pumpkins come out after harvest. I mean, it was ridiculous. And then the size of the. I think you have squash or something of that nature. Some type of a melon you have. It's not pumpkin though.
I have watermelon. I actually, because I was now caught up in the first world, the First Nation experience, I tried to grow traditional crops from various First Nation countries.
Mm.
I had the West Indian pumpkin, the calabasa. I have kabocha, the Japanese pumpkin. I used a lot of, I ended up with bitter melon. I had Circe, in other words, the big
Mm-hmm.
Circe,
Mm-hmm.
chocho abundantly. So I use tropical crops that normally you wouldn't find here in Georgia and try to find ways of cultivating them to the point of bearing fruit. Uh,
What do you do with this crop when once it's harvested?
well, last year was my first full pilot year. I had two pilot years. Last year, I brought everything to fruition. It was more than, of course, any one family could have. I gave away most of it. It was my Thanksgiving harvest. So I gave it freely. I wanted to just find out what works, what would not work, how does the marketing work, and I gifted those to family, friends. I was shipping out boxes of sweet potatoes, purple sweet potatoes, different kinds of sweet potatoes. Uh, what could be shipped out, I shipped out to people. Same thing with my sorrel. Although last year I didn't have a good return on the sorrel, but Scotch bonnet peppers, all sorts of chili peppers, I shared. I shared freely. I tried to bottle some. I experimented with how one preserves them because, mind you, now, if I'm looking to make a living from it, I need to figure out durability. I need to figure out how one preserves it, how one markets the product so that it is attractive to a market, to both Caribbean, African, and African American, because I'm going after the diaspora, the African diaspora market, and other people who appreciate
Mhm.
African diaspora foods. So the cuisine is really what I try to feed, that cuisine, and whomever is interested in that will come. So there'll be
So,
primarily people like us.
all right. So I get that, and I'm sure you're going to have. I mean, you're not gonna have hand for turn things. I mean, you're not gonna have hand for give out and for make money off and all these things. But what is it that you're trying to tell your clientele? Um, I know that you have a connection with Earth. I know that you have a desire for people to respect respect nature, but respect their relationship with nature. So, I mean, all of this stuff that you're doing is organic, and you're going at it in a natural way that which you've learned from your experiences. But why? I mean, there are companies that do farming, and they thousands of acres, and they do all these things, and they mass produce, and they mass sell, and all these things to become millionaires. What is it that you're doing with Ile Ife for your clients?
Well, I want to say every product I have touched from its seed stage, everything that I produce, I have touched. We cannot underestimate that energy, that energy. So what I want to do for my client is a few things. One, I want to give them food that is high in nutrition, that is nutrient dense. I want to give them the appreciation that our own produce can be had wherever we are, more or less, not everything, but quite a quite a bit of it can. I want to give them the sense that you can grow where you are. And I also want to sharpen an awareness of what is going on globally around us in terms of food, in terms of shortages, in terms of the not just the food desert, but the waste, the lack of nutrition in foods, even the ones that are sold at Whole Foods, that sometimes we forget that people need to eat and everyone has a right to food. And we ought to be able to produce in such a way that people can afford and supplement their diets in a realistic way. So I want them to see that. I also want them to see the joy of growing something. Not everybody has the time or space to grow, but everyone can grow something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's a very different feeling for you and your family.
Yeah, I definitely understand that, and I applaud that, and I know that my viewers are going to applaud that. How is it that my viewers can get involved and reach out, whether it's to make orders from Ile Ife or to give a helping hand in some way? Is what can they do?
Well, we would love to have them come through and do volunteer work with us, learn from us. That's one way in which they can help. And there are all sorts of aspects, of course, to going commercial with some of this. I'm not looking to feed a million people, but for the market, I'd like to feed them with the best energy and the best content of produce. They can also reach out and purchase some of the things that we produce. We'll be preserving and marketing our products, both processed as jams and preserves, and as well as dried. We do offer those for sale, and that is another way in which they can support. We can also provide a venue for like-minded people who are concerned about our health, who are concerned about our control of our lives, to come and talk to people in the area about what they're doing and how some of these things can be realized given the limitations we may face financially, and spread that word and that encouragement. Uh, we would welcome such opportunities here at Ile Ife as well. Pretty much our email address is ilefeorganics@gmail.
Okay, and what's the Instagram handle?
Now, Ile Ife Organics as well.
Okay, wonderful. I'll make sure that is up here or down here or something to make sure that people see it. It'll also be in the description of this video. Falami, thank you so much for sitting with us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for what you are doing to represent nature and natural livity and loving ourselves through our food to our gut. It's important that we understand that our gut is our second brain. And if we care it, we will live better lives. Tell me some parting words where you want these viewers to understand about just life in general. Give me some philosophies that come from Falami.
We don't have to make it as complicated as we make it. We have become alienated from the simplest, most natural ways of being. It doesn't have to be that way. We need to go back to our source. We need to find out what we can do. We need to curb our appetites so that they fit into what we are able to provide for our families and our larger communities. Those would be some of my philosophies.
Yeah, man.
Love
Yeah,
what you do. Love what you do.
yeah,
And
man.
know that you have the answers, the skills, the intellect within you to make it happen. I give thanks.
Yeah, man. I love that. I give thanks also. Thank you so much, Falami, for sitting with us. Big up yourself. Me love it. Me love it. Me love it. And look, a young lady out of where in Jamaica? Spanish Town?
No, actually, the one who's helping
No, man. No, no,
helping
no,
to
no.
bring.
You me I talk about. Where you come
Oh
from in
yes,
Jamaica?
yes, yeah. My family come from Spanish Town, although my
Yeah,
born, my raised at Kingston, but my born at Spanish Town.
you see it. Out of Spanish Town and into the world and impacting the people with the culture that you have garnered from all over, an eclectic experience of culture and awareness. And we give thanks that you are here to share that energy with us. So again, thanks for sitting with Good News Jamaica on our mobile reasoning.
Thank you very much, and everything good for Good News Jamaica. Everything. Thank you.
Greetings and thank you, man. All right, full blessings. And until such time, keep up the great, great, great work.
All right. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you for checking us out on Good News Jamaica TV for content that informs, inspires, and transforms. Please like, share, leave a comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more positive Jamaica content. Walk good.